I really appreciate that you take the time to come to a meeting that is designed to listen to your input. My name is Ramon Trias. I'm the Director of Planning and Zoning for the City of Coral Gables. And tonight we are going to discuss the downtown overlay. I think that most of you may have been notified by mail of the different meetings that we're trying to do for this process. Is everybody familiar with the downtown overlay as a concept? Does anybody know? Does everybody know what we're talking about? Let me give you the most basic introduction, and then as we go through tonight, we will have a chance to ask questions from different people from the staff. The overlay is the set of regulations, mostly zoning regulations, that apply in the future, that will apply to the area around Miracle Mile, Giralda, and north and south to the area that most people will recognize as downtown Coral Gables. We have a really good zoning code in place. We're trying to make it better. The best way to make it better is to listen to people and to get ideas that will be effective. So that is the goal of tonight. Now, tonight we're very lucky to be here at the museum. I mean, where else can you find, what other city can you find an exhibit on the very same topic that we're going to be speaking on at the actual museum? There's a fantastic exhibit. I really encourage you to go see it on the history of Miracle Mile and some of the opportunities in terms of the future of Miracle Mile. In fact, there's a very interesting video that has some people that are here tonight about 20 years ago, talking about the same issues, the very same issues that we are discussing. So as we all know, this has been an ongoing discussion for quite a long time. Now, we also have one very special person here that we brought from New York to speak to you, and that's Errol Jackson. Errol, why don't you stand up? Errol is the designer. He's the designer of Miracle Mile, of the project. So if you have any questions about the project, we have the person that is most knowledgeable and can explain the ideas, the concepts, and hopefully give you a sense of what's going to happen. So given that introduction, what I'll do is I'll give a simple, brief presentation on the, let me go back to here. Okay, there you go. On what we're talking about. Miracle Mile is right here, as you know. And most buildings tend to be 1 or 2 stories, relatively small, right on Miracle Mile. Right behind it, in the next few blocks, there's some larger building, much larger buildings, and there's also some public parking garages. In fact, Kevin, the director of parking, is here today also. If you have any questions about parking, he will be able to help us with that. And what's going to happen fairly soon, what's going to happen starting in the next couple of months, is that there's going to be a lot of construction in the public spaces of Miracle Mile and Giralda. What I mean by public spaces is clearly the sidewalks mostly and the street. There's a really, really interesting project in place that is going to completely change the look, the feel, the function of Miracle Mile. The quality of the project is outstanding. It's granite, fantastic landscape, really a curveless design that creates this seamless space throughout the core of the downtown. And then what we would like to be able to discuss with you is that doing those incredible projects, such as Giralda, those very exciting projects, what do you think the effect is going to be on the buildings and the activities around them? I mean, most of these projects, when they're done in many cities, they truly result in a transformation for the better of the community. Now, Coral Gables is a great community to start with. So when we're talking about making it better, we're really aspiring to excellence, real excellence. So from that point of view, that's why it's so important to be able to talk to you and chat with you. Now, in addition to that, I want to point out that, for example, Marina Foglia from the BID is here, and she can tell you that we have been discussing this issue with her and with multiple property owners and interested people for several years, at least 3 or so that I have participated on. But how long do you think, would you say, Marina, has this been going on in terms of a discussion? Probably about 4 years. About 4 years. So there has been a really serious effort on the part of all of us to come up with a plan. If you have questions about the actual construction of the streetscape, maybe we can help you with them later on. That is not the purpose of tonight's meeting, but we do have that information. It's going to be built in sections. The project management of this effort is really well run by Ernesto Pino from the city, very, very professional, very expert on these things. And I think that it will minimize the disruption. Now, in addition to that, as I said before, we are trying to come up with the rules for development for the area around those very exciting streetscapes. Now, I always start my meetings by explaining the public notification, because many times people ask about, oh, nobody told us about this meeting. I want to assure you that the city, and in particular all the staff that you have here, make a real effort to post all the images, all the information on the web, do legal advertisement, have notification to the BID members, which the BID, I want to thank the BID for doing that very effectively in the last few weeks. Also, we did a mailing to all the property owners within the area, which is not a requirement of the code. It's simply something that we believed was a good thing to do. And in addition to that, and this is the area of the mail out that we did, the area covered by this overlay. In addition to that, we've had a variety of meetings already, a variety of meetings that have resulted in very good ideas. In fact, we're still changing our mind in some ideas. We're still refining some of the key components of the overlay. So we welcome all kinds of input. But as you can see, we've had meetings with the Planning and Zoning Board, with the BID, with the Economic Advisory Board, and Javier Betancourt, the Director of Economic Development, is here. And he's also one of the people that I think can provide some support and some ideas if you need. And then eventually we are going to get to the City Commission. And at that point is when decisions are made. So up to that point, we have a chance as citizens and as staff to propose ideas. So nothing is set in stone yet. I mean, there's plenty of time to propose ideas. So that's what's going on at this point. Now, the vision of downtown Coral Gables, as the exhibit shows, has been going on for a long time. I think probably one of the most important moments may have been the 2002 charrette, but that has been an ongoing process. Multiple meetings, multiple discussions. But I think that there has been a shared vision, which is that the city's neighborhoods and districts are important, and that the downtown belongs to everyone. And those were the words in 2002 in that charrette. And the reason is that it represents the identity of the city. And that is normal. That happens everywhere. And I think that it happens exceptionally well in Coral Gables. And all of that has to do with the fact that we are very lucky to have a great plan that was originally implemented by George Merrick in the 20s. And when I say that, I mean that with great admiration, because it really allows us to do many of the things that we need to do to get there, to get to that vision. And the key to the vision is to be able to combine both the public and the private investment. If we are able to do that in a way that makes sense, then we will be most successful. Some of the benefits that I think we're trying to accomplish are listed here, and also we have a one-page summary that gives you an idea of the basic concepts of the overlay, and that's available for you at the entrance, at the door. But I think that one of the key ideas is that most people tell us that it's better to have people live in downtown, having more people living there, and also that smaller scale incremental development is a good idea. I mean, right now we have some very good large buildings, but not too many of the smaller scale buildings. There's a real attempt also at managing parking better, coming up with a vision that has parking, of course, but is done in a way that is beautiful, and it doesn't interfere with development. And at the end of the day, the test of this is going to be whether we have the most outstanding pedestrian experience at the ground level. Of course, Earl has done a great job with the design of the sidewalks of Miracle Mile and Giralda, and now we need to think about the buildings. Now, one of the drawings that I like to show is this map, which shows in the peach color the buildings before 1964, and in the reddish color the buildings after 1964. Now, why do I say 1964? Because that is the time where in the zoning code the minimum parking requirements kick in. So what happens is that the development changes. If you look at the size of the reds, the size of the red buildings tends to be much bigger. And that has to do with the fact that parking is usually structured parking garages, and that the dimensions of that are very, very inflexible. You know, parking is a certain dimension, and that's about it. And then what you will see is that in Miracle Mile, which is right here in the center, and in Giralda, a little bit towards the north, most of the buildings are from before 1964. There are very few new buildings, very few. A few, but not too many. And the reason is that it's just very difficult to fit development there. Now, for example, some of the original mixed-use buildings from Merrick's day would be, let's say, 3 stories. If you want to talk in zoning language, you know, those things that we like to use at City Hall, FAR, for example, that would be the floor area ratio. That would be 3.0, which is in the code. Well, that's 3.0, 3 stories within the block. Now, in theory, that's what the code says you can do today. In practice, because you would have to provide parking for that also, which at the time of the 1920s was not done because you had to provide parking in addition, then you end up with a much bigger building. And that, I think, is the biggest distinction if you look at the historic fabric of the city and some of the current code requirements. So, you know, we're trying to brainstorm about that and brainstorm about whether that makes sense or not. So in terms of the overlay, I think that, and I don't want to get overly technical because sometimes it gets confusing, but there are a few basic ideas. One is a boundary, which is shown in that dashed line, which includes the downtown, and it goes a little bit south of the current central business district boundary. And then 2 special areas. One is the 4 blocks of Miracle Mile, and let's keep in mind, it's only 4 blocks. It's a very small area. And then 1 block in Giralda. The 1 block in Giralda is the block that is going to be reconstructed. The sidewalk is going to be very nicely done with those beautiful patterns. The basic point is that if you look at the current regulations on the left, we like to think that residential is allowed in the upper stories in the downtown. But the reality is that it's only allowed in the large projects, meaning over 20,000 square feet in area that are mixed use. Unless you're doing a big project that is a mixed use project, residential is not allowed. So that means that the smaller scale projects that like the one I showed you before and so on are just not possible. So we're trying to make that legal. The other thing is that we're trying to see if we could make parking a little bit more flexible, particularly in the 2 key areas, the Miracle Mile and Giralda. By that I mean that currently, if you have an FAR, floor area ratio of 1.4 or less in the downtown, you don't have to provide parking. But that means basically one story. Perhaps 2 or 3 stories could be a better incentive in terms of trying to create the high quality development that we all would like. I'm sorry. Then we're trying to have some clear standards for at the ground level, meaning storefronts and transparency requirements, which again encourage pedestrian areas. We also have some special pedestrian-oriented signs. That was one of the things that we always heard from the bid for a long time, that there was a need to have better signage for pedestrians. So I think that's a good idea. So we're working on that. And then that the parking garages would not go all the way to the front of the building. So there's a better aesthetic to the facades. In addition to that, we also are proposing some expanded business hours and some other changes that the special extended hours of operation, and then an expedited process to approve outdoor seating in Miracle Mile and Giralda, meaning that it's pre-approved, is in locations that it makes sense and it's fast. And finally, we're not allowing driveways in some streets that are important. So those are the big ideas. The other big idea, I think, is that there are no changes in the zoning map or in the land use map. The only change is the boundary of the overlay. I mean, right now there's an overlay. You're familiar with the overlay that it's right on Miracle Mile. So we're expanding that boundary. That is one change. But the zoning and the land use are going to remain. So there are no changes of land use, there are no changes of zoning, so you have the same development rights in the properties now and in the future. And the idea is to maybe through some targeted requirements, like for example, an additional setback along Lejeune and also along Douglas Road to have a better sidewalk. As you know, Lejeune is at times only 5 feet or so, and it's not very pedestrian oriented. Some of those specific improvements in some areas where it matters and where it can be done. And then some hierarchy of the streets. So some of the mapping that I think could help us come up with a more targeted zoning regulations would be very useful. And getting to the end, the last big idea is that we are requiring some form requirements for buildings. In particular, a step back at 45 feet. 45 feet is one of those magic numbers. 45 feet is the height of the cornice line at City Hall. The cornice line is that beautiful stone banner, the band just before you get to the roof. So that is 45 feet. And if you look at some of the pictures in the exhibit, in the older pictures from the 20s, 30s, and 40s, that seemed to be the right proportion. So having that and then having a setback afterwards could lead to a very nice urban environment. And that is what is proposed here in this image for Giralda and Miracle Mile. So a combination of things, better parking approaches, better design form ideas, some specific areas of the city targeted for some improvements and so on, and then a really exciting sidewalk and public space on Miracle Mile and Giralda. Those are the things that are coming, and they're coming very soon. And I think we are looking forward to the day that wonderful rendering becomes reality. So that is my presentation, and I want to keep it very informal. Like I said, we have some really great resource people that can answer questions. And I'll end right now and open it up for any kind of questions. Mr. Holmes, yes.
Some of you may know I oppose most of this that he's saying. It's not a done deal, and I think there are reasons for us to stand up against it. Is this better? What they're proposing, and this, it's gratuitous, they don't need it to do it this way. I asked them at the beginning not to load up all of the construction all at one time and put some of us out of business. As you know, when there's construction projects in any retail shopping area, some of the stores go out of business. They can't make it. They can't pay the rent. That not only affects those stores, it affects their property owners, who then, can't meet their obligations, and they can't find another tenant to come in during this construction. So the construction is a major issue for merchants and for property owners, and I asked them, please, stagger it. It's hard enough to deal with streetscape construction. Let's not pile it on all at one time, and people come and they look and they see all of this construction going on, and they say, sorry, I'm going down to South Miami, I'm going to Dayland, I'm going to Mall of the Americans, wherever, because we got so much going on all at one time. We need, I believe, to stand up for our rights and say, no, not so much construction that could literally kill our businesses. There's time for us to rise up and express our concerns. Another concern is, do we really want Miracle Mile, the main street of Coral Gables, to go mid-rise as they're proposing? Another one is, there's a very elusive question here which he needs to nail down for us. This thing started with the big developers wanting to get a free ride on parking, which would be unprecedented. And he told me himself that that was what this was all about, giving the big developers the ability to not provide parking. Then he's backpedaled, he's gone here, he's gone there. We don't know where he's going to come down because he has 100 different stories. We need to nail that down. If I submit to you that if we're going to give up our right to have parking for the shoppers, there needs to be a parking study to see how that's going to hurt us or possibly help us in the future. This idea of waiving parking for the big developers is incredible, and I think we should oppose it.
Thank you very much. Yes, let me. Thank you.
Larry Rentz with the Alan Morris Company. The first two goals on your sheet are residential use allowed on small parcels. I think that's a great idea. Right now, my understanding is in the downtown area, you have to have a 20,000 square foot site and 200 feet of frontage on a street. How would you propose changing that regulation to allow for building on smaller parcels? And secondly, parking incentives for buildings that meet the goals of the downtown overlay. Now, you've mentioned general goals, but is there a list of goals specifically?
Yeah, the actual document is about 50 pages long, and the reason why but the reason why Mr. Holmes is correct in some of the things he said. The reason why I'm changing some of the ideas is because we are listening. We're listening to people, and based on the input that we get, we try to fine-tune and refine the ideas. One of the keys, once you allow the smaller parcels, parcels over 2,500 square feet, to have residential, one of the issues is parking. How do you park it? And we believe that parking should be provided. In fact, parking is very important. But we have a lot of public parking. And for example, one of the ideas is that the ground level uses, such as restaurants and so on, don't necessarily need to have parking in their own parcel. Now, that is not designed for the big developers. The big developers, the ones over 20,000 square feet, still have to provide the parking as required. That is what we're proposing. So it is designed for the small incremental development that we're talking about. Small projects don't exist in any significant way except for rehab and remodeling and so on. However, if we have some more effective parking regulations, they may take place. And can I give a chance to other people? Well, just one.
This issue that he just described here, now, if we are able to believe what he just said, is a major issue. So I'm going to ask our friendly planning and zoning director, how can we be sure? Because he has a right to change his mind. He's not giving this to us in writing, that there's going to be no exemption from parking requirements for the big developers. How can we be sure that you won't change your mind?
Well, one of the nice things is that I don't make the decisions. I just make recommendations. So what you need to listen to is whatever the city commission approves. Okay, and the city commission is going to listen to your ideas, and hopefully they will listen to some of the things that the staff, meaning myself and my colleagues, will recommend. But I think what's very important that we need to keep in mind is that this is a work in progress. This really requires all of us to work together. Yes, sir.
You're making it conducive for people to come in, buy up frontage, and go build. Your rulings are making it conducive for a developer to come in, buy, and say, goodbye, stores, we're building.
I wouldn't say that. No, and I think that well, if that is the way you feel, then we need to then we need to think about it some more.
Very obvious that's the way you present it.
Okay.
How many mom and pop stores, how many mom and pop owners are going to be around if what their plans are implemented?
All right. Well, why don't we do this instead of looking at why don't you propose what your vision is? I mean, the kinds of things that the way it should be. And okay. All right. And that's a good one.
We have an overlay district as it is. Why not stick with the overlay district we already have?
Okay. All right. Does everybody agree with that statement? No. Any other thoughts? Let's say, does anybody want to propose other ideas? Yes, sir.
Truman Skinner with McBride Properties. I would like at least some clarification so that there will not be a sort of a misconstruing of what this overlay is. As I understand it, there's going to be no construction related to the overlay at all. And by the time the streetscape is in fact constructed, as a practical matter, anyone choosing to utilize the new overlay would be starting construction long after streetscape is finished. Is that reasonably accurate?
I would say so. Yeah, and keep in mind that the only construction going on is the streetscape, the sidewalks, whatever happens between the sidewalks and the other side of the street. The public space, that's the only construction that's going on.
I believe it's my understanding that with the current overlay that we have now, any developer could come in and buy from individual property owners and accrue enough square footage to then go up and develop the land. So I don't see a difference in what the overlay was or would be, except an improvement.
Right, and I think that's a fair statement. Yes.
Hello, my name is Burton Hirsch. I'm an architect. My office has been around here for about 20 years. Another friend of mine, John Forbes, another architect who has been around here for 15, 20 years. Basically, the way it is now, if you don't have, there's no way that you can ever improve a property unless it's 20,000 square feet. What this overlay does, and by the way, the existing overlay is a shell. There's absolutely nothing in it other than the title, downtown overlay. If you read it, it's an empty shell. What this does is this allows us to improve properties, to give people a reason to maybe rebuild their small pieces that are less than 20,000 square feet. My office has been in this area for for decades. I have 8 employees, and we all park in garages. The little bit of parking in that the smaller buildings would not provide is much in the way it is now. The way it is now, if you're 1.45 FAR or below, you don't need to provide any parking. And this is allowing us to maybe rebuild buildings that we could not have rebuilt before. We're redoing our sidewalks. We're getting a little bit more bandwidth. And it would be nice, while we see the sidewalks being improved, to see some of these smaller buildings that have passed their time, that could be improved, to be something like the little buildings, the little 3-story buildings, 45 feet high, that Ramon showed us in the overlay, in the opening.
Thank you. Anybody here in the back? Yeah.
Just a very general comment. The only increase in height is from 45 feet to 70 feet. So the overlay is not a huge change. That's already the overlay right now. Yes. So there's a lot of small property owners in Gables, and with a little opportunity to assemblage big parcels. So this opportunity, as Burton just mentioned, will move the city from the little 1-story on Miracle Mile to maybe 2 or 3 or 4 stories.
Thank you.
Good evening. So I'm not a property owner on Miracle Mile. My name's John Forbes. I was a property owner at 4565 Ponce. Same kind of thing. We have an overlay over there, an industrial overlay, same kind of stuff, 100 feet. The underlying use, I think, is the 20,000 foot minimum lot size. Practical terms, that's 200 feet of street frontage. And the current overlay really benefits the big user. I ultimately sold because I was tapped out. Unless my neighbors want to do something or they don't, I mean, just think, 1 out of 4, 5, 6 neighbors has to go along with you. If one stops, you're done. Your property value stays the same. And this is just my own experience. Your property value stays the same. If you have a little flexibility, and I couldn't understand why this was in the code. And that was really why I ended up selling a building that I had for, I don't know, 15 years, something like that. So I would be for it. Like I said, I don't have a horse in the race, but as an architect, I think it would benefit your land values, you know, and give you some flexibility long term, as I think most of us as small business people are interested in. You know, it's part retirement and part so forth. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask one last thing, and then we're going to talk about parking.
Who needs David Copperfield? You watch him, he's a musician that can make rabbits appear or disappear, and as an artist, it's sleight of hand. When we have this presentation today, it's sleight of hand. When they started this thing, it was about giving developers the ability to build tall buildings on Miracle Mile and not provide parking. Now they're selling you this thing, oh, this is about the little guy. But he's admitted that he's just one small part of the wheel. He's not giving it to us in writing. This is a fake out. It's a fake out. If you find yourself saying, oh, this sounds reasonable, this is for the little guy. No, this is for the big guy. This is all about helping the big guy. It's sleight of hand. You're being deceived. If I hadn't stepped in, they wouldn't even be giving you the sleight of hand. They would have just said, yeah, we're helping we're eliminating parking for everyone. The big developers can do it. It's only because I protested that they're pulling the sleight of hand. We need to fight it.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. What I would like to do, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one comment. First of all, my name is Marina Foglia, Executive Director of the Business Improvement District. Thank you all for coming, a very important meeting. Like Ramon said, this is the initial of conversations with property owners and with merchants. I came in, it's been 2 years since I've been the Executive Director, and most of my time has been dedicated, to advocating for the small business, talking about streetscape. And like I always said, streetscape is the hardware. That is the physical improvements to the area. Thankfully, that has been approved. The property owners decided to pay 50% for the building of the physical improvements to the street. So that is the hardware, that what we want to call it, like the analogy. But what we're talking about is the software, is the activation of our streets. And when I came in, the overlay, it's had many, many renditions. But when we started studying and I started to understand it, it's not an easy concept, so it will take, maybe more than one meeting. But in reality, the only people who can develop currently are the large property owners. And the idea is to be able to preserve the nature and the character of what we currently have. So in terms of Miracle Mile, and especially Giralda, these are small buildings, small mom and pop shops. We want it to be and remain as it is. So by working with the city, and this is something that the bid proposes, not coming from the city, we've been working hand in hand, and we want to be able to allow the small property owner to be able to develop. Now we can still have conversations in terms of minimum parking requirements. I know that there have been conversations allowing no parking up to 45, anything over, including some parking. But as a bid, as the executive director, I believe that our responsibility has always been, to help the small property owner. And this is something that we're trying to preserve. I believe, our downtown is very unique. We are a community, and we want to be able to continue at that. In terms of all the documents, I think we have been very transparent. We have a website. We've sent emails to everybody. We have all the documents, the executive summary, the new timeline, all that can be found on the website. Anytime any new rendition or version of whether it's streetscape or the timeline or our overlay, you can all find it on our website. We've sent links, and like I've always said, I am available at any time to answer any questions. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Marina. We've been lucky to have great partners like the BID and like all of you, and I encourage you to continue that conversation. Now, I'm going to ask Kevin Kinney, who's our parking director, to talk a little bit about the future of parking and the parking garages that are coming together. So you can see that there are multiple things going on all at once, that if they work together well, we're going to end up with a very, very successful downtown.
I actually heard a question at one point about construction. The garages go up after the streetscape is done. So no parking offline until after streetscape. But on the south side of the mile off of Andalusia, at the end of the day, which is probably about 4 years from now, there will be 1,000 public parking spaces. Primarily on the 200 block, but there will also be some on the 300 block. Parking is a very important, it is my job. It's very important for downtown Coral Gables. We worked every day with big developers, but I can tell you, I make them pay and build parking. Now, I don't necessarily want them to overbuild parking, which in some cases we do. But the developments that I see where we hinder development is the small parcels, because it's very difficult if you've got a 2,500 or a 5,000 square foot lot on the mile and you want to build something. It's just not feasible to provide the parking. So I do think some toolbox that would allow smaller property owners to develop their parking would put them in a better position to avoid being bought out by a large developer. But it is my job to try and make sure that whatever that toolbox is works, because we don't want to lose what we have downtown now. But as far as the city goes, we understand that for the vitality of downtown, that we have to be a key player in parking that's available.
Thank you, Kevin. Let me go to a new person, then I come to you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Charles McDonald. I have the chocolate shop down the street on Aragon. Parking is a big issue here, and I don't know if you've closed this Aragon Avenue off tonight, because this is amazing. Usually this time of night, this becomes a parking lot. Traffic backs up trying to get... you planned well. But one of the things is I noticed that the city just goes gangbusters on new technology to be able to draw revenue from the parking spaces they have. While you invest a great deal in technology to collect money, there's no real improvement I see in the parking technology itself. These parking garages that you have, the airport, a lot of places, I think even down in the falls, they've installed systems that track the number of open parking spaces in a parking garage, so that when you approach the parking garage, you know there's a spot or not. There's a lot of people that come in here to want to park, they want to shop, they want to eat, they go in the parking garage and they wander around for 20 minutes and there's no spaces, and then they exit, and then they have to go look somewhere else. If you're going to invest the money in collecting, I'd like you to invest some money in improving the efficiency of these parking garages, because I've watched people, the other thing is people have handicap stickers, and they've told me that if there's an attendant at the booth, they don't have to pay to park in the parking garage, but there's not an attendant all the time, so they're stuck. They didn't know that they didn't pay to exit, but now they're at a gate that won't let them out because they have a handicap sticker. So there needs to be some real solutions made with these parking garages, because they're a bottleneck, and they're not really helping the merchants. When people come to shop, they chase 20 minutes in a parking garage with no place to park and then leave.
Thank you.
I'm always looking for improvements. When we bid the new system for this garage right across the street, one of the options was a little sign at the entrance that says 200 spaces available. But I do need to take a little bit of issue. My facilities turn over an amazing number of times, and during the year, there's probably 10 days where they're full to the roof. This one is one that does get filled up. What I would say is there is an intercom at the exit, and the people that answer that intercom can vend the machine and let the person with the handicap permit out. And I know it works because I see 80 or 90 of those a week. Now, there may be some people who just miss that, and so they pay. When we do have customer service staff during the peak hours, and they're out there trying to teach people how to use the system, even now, 18 months after it was installed. So I'm not saying we can't improve, but I would let you know that these garages operate really efficiently, especially when we have big events, and this one gets slammed. And we don't have good circulation on Aragon because it is what it is. It's a 2-lane street, and it's hard to get 500 people out of that garage in 3 hours on a 2-way street that's busy. So yes, there's things we need to try and improve and look at, but I'm willing to look at anything. And in fact, I think one of the things that will be coming the next time I buy equipment is that issue of the sign at the entrance that says how many spaces are available. We'll be back on the table, and hopefully this time it'll pass.
It's a great idea. I think we have really a well-run parking program as well as anyone. So, yes, sir.
It's a virtual impossibility for any small store owner to create a parking spot. You cannot enter from Miracle Mile. The back street is impossible. What do you have planned? How much additional parking do you have planned?
1,000 spaces, right?
Well, yeah, there's 1,000 spaces going in, but that is actually roughly 400 spaces on top of what we currently have. So it's going to replace 600, and we're going to have 400 new spaces.
Very good. Yes, sir.
Just a quick one. At what point does SunPass as a viable option? You mentioned the airport. The first thing moving cars quickly through SunPass is the fastest way that I'm aware of. Do you have to have a certain critical mass before it's economically feasible to use SunPass?
I love the people at SunPass, but they want a lot of money. But having said that, I'll just let you know kind of where the industry is going. Every car you buy this year is going to have its own IP address, basically. There will come a time where, and this may even be before I retire, where you pull up to the curb and your car gives you a text message or speaks to you and says, "Welcome to Coral Gables. Our rate is $1.75 an hour. Have a good day," and you just walk away. The technology is there. There's people trying to put that system together. It's just not there yet.
But SunPass is here.
Right, but it's a very expensive solution, and it would require us to raise our rates significantly.
We can think about all those issues and come up with even better solutions. Now, who is excited about the streetscape? Okay. So what I would like to do, I would like to ask Errol to say a few things about his design concept. I mean, we brought him all the way from New York, okay? And he's here only for this meeting, right? No, actually, he was at another meeting, and I said, "Hey, why don't you come tonight? We have a really nice group of people from the community that are going to be asking questions." So I know he's a great speaker because I've seen him many times. And he's also a very great visionary of the artistic achievement that this streetscape is going to be. So I would really ask you to, why don't you tell us what the concept is for the streetscape that we're going to see in a few months constructed?
Thank you, I guess, for putting me on the spot. I understand that tonight's meeting is about the zoning overlay, the overlay district, and in the last 14 months when we've been putting together the design for the streetscape, the overlay has come up countless times. You know, the motivation I understand behind the streetscape project and behind the overlay is really about reinvigorating Miracle Mile, right? Making more viable businesses, creating more activity, creating more life, increasing profits, making it safer, healthier, more fun. And I think some of the things I've heard are really great. Like, I think that it'd be hard to argue that if more people lived closer on top of just behind Miracle Mile and Geralda, that increased foot traffic would generate a new culture of being at the coffee shop, being at the bakery, being in shops, and being on the street. So I think those kinds of things sound really, really good. And in all the conversations, and I'm not really speaking for these guys, but I can just tell you that in all the conversations we've had, we've always tried to protect the idea that many addresses on the street are better than few. So the big footprint, I mean, if you look at Miracle Mile today, you know where the big footprint is, and you know how active that part of the street is because there's nobody going in and out of that facade. So in all the conversations we've had, we're trying to promote as many addresses as possible so people have options and things to do and that good exchange between whatever's inside and whatever's on the street. For us, in terms of the streetscape, we did a ton of homework. Many of you, I see very familiar faces in the room, have been at a lot of the community presentations. It was a very slow start. If you remember, everybody was dying to know what's it gonna be, what's it gonna be. We did our homework, we studied, we got to know you as best as we could, which has been a total pleasure, I can say. And what we're coming through with and what's been approved and what's about to be built is a design that we believe is timeless. Coral Gables is celebrating 90 years old this year. We believe that the streetscape we're putting in place is a 300-year-old street or a 300-year street, if not more. It's designed around the idea that natural materials don't fade the same way fake ones do, and that the stone we're using in the sidewalks is lasting and will age with you and multiple generations of people who live in Coral Gables in the future. The patterns are born of the timeless qualities of the southern Florida sky, brilliance of the blue, changing to chunky white clouds in the afternoon, that amazing warm sunset that you get, the amazing warm sunrise you get. It's quite different. You know the cloud pattern is different. We've studied all those things to try and connect with the climate of the place as we've brought it forth. So on Miracle Mile, that little slot of sky that you see as you walk the mile today between the trees and the cornice of the buildings is actually brought down into the pavement. And we've got an amazing array of blue, white, gray, and dark gray stone that help capture that in that slot to give this impression of walking in the clouds and to create a little poetry, which we all know is how Coral Gables was first conceived of through the words of George Merrick. On Giralda, we thought there must be some way of capturing the essence of the sky, but making it unique to Miracle Mile. We wouldn't want to do the same thing. So celebrating the afternoon rains, the tropical rains that come, was what drove that concentric pattern. And if you look at it, the colors have evolved. In the center of Giralda, you have a bluer palette, a cooler palette. At the ends, you have the warmer colors of sunset and sunrise. As you know, the orientation of Giralda between Ponce and Galiano is east-west. So there's a bit of a relationship to timeless principles of place that are embodied in the way that the streetscape has been designed.
Thank you, Earl. I would like Javier Betancourt, the Director of Economic Development, to say a few things, a few words.
Good evening. So just a quick discussion, if you will, about the context in which we're working. The whole point of this project, the whole point of the Streetscape project, the whole point of investing in our downtown is to remain competitive. And you as merchants and you as property owners know this very well. If you're selling the same shoe in the same dated store that you've been selling for 30 years, your competitors are going to put you out of business. You know that you continuously have to reinvest in your store and in your product to remain competitive. There is a ton of retail being built throughout South Florida currently. You have Flagler Street, which is being invested in and is going to attract better retail. You have Brickell City Center, you have Mary Brickell Village, you have Cocoa Walk, Sunset Place in South Miami, Doral, places you never even thought of as retail centers that are getting retail, much less the mega mall they're going to build in Miami Lakes. A ton of retail, giving people more options to spend their money. If we stand still, if we don't invest not only in our public spaces, but in our private spaces, we'll die. People won't shop here. People won't dine here. This is investing not only in our community, but in your businesses and your property. This is what's going to enable us to compete with those other neighborhoods that are investing not only in their public space, but in their private space as well. If we stand still, we'll die. We need to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Javier. Anybody that hasn't had a chance to speak? Okay, a new person right here.
Name's Victor Slaughter, property owner, 41 Miracle Mile and 366. I just wanted to point again at that map from 1964, or from buildings that were built post 964. And you look at all the tiny parcels along the mile, and they haven't been touched. To me, that's the evidence that we have to change something. And that's it.
Thank you very much. A few repeat here.
There's a very interesting article today in the Wall Street Journal about George Merrick. There's a new biography. I suggest you read it.
I actually did. It's a very good book. Arva Parks gave a wonderful talk here in this very room a few months ago on it. A fantastic book. All right, one more thing.
I appreciate, he is gracious in giving me a chance to speak. I submit to you all that they've systematically excluded, even from this meeting, the people who are going to be most hurt by their shifting sands proposals that are really driven by the big developers. Who has been excluded? You know, they put up a big chart here on all the meetings that they've had. Do you know that none of those meetings, count them, 0, included merchants? And yet the merchants are the ones that are going to be driven out of business by excessive construction. Even in the best situation, when you have great construction, merchants go out of business. So why would they have excluded the merchants? This is the first meeting where merchants are actually included. We don't have a representative sample here today of the people most likely to be hurt by this because they have excluded them. Is this a democracy?
Thank you. Are there any merchants here tonight? Can you raise your hand?
Yeah, this is the first meeting that you've invited.
No, every meeting is public, and
It's public, but you haven't invited them. I asked you to invite them. She claimed that you
all right,
invited
all
them,
right.
and they weren't invited.
Well, all right. If we need to do more and better meetings, certainly I will listen to any suggestions. You had a.
We need to have a democracy where the people whose property interests are affected have an opportunity to be heard.
I just want to take advantage of our New York designer visiting us. You know, you made a statement that more addresses on Miracle Mile is better. Could you expand on that? Do you mean encourage more specialty shops as opposed to like a Bloomingdale's?
Thank you, thank you. Errol, I'll put you on the spot again. Thank you.
We're architects and we do a lot of city construction work, new cities all over the world, business improvement districts. So like we revisit existing districts, and if you want great street life, you need a number of addresses. So what that means is, think of a great shopping street, any great shopping street in the world, like Spring Street in Soho, in New York, for instance. There's not one instance on that street where one entity takes up the whole block, right? Which means, in your case, 600 feet from street to street on Miracle Mile, if you had one address, there'd be one reason to go to 600 feet. If you had 10 addresses, there's 10 reasons, which means more diversity, more cross-pollination, and more of one business feeding another business. So multiple addresses is always great on a commercial corridor where you want great sidewalks.
Thank you very much. Now, we've been here for about an hour. Are there any final ideas or anything we forgot to cover? I don't want to keep you here all night, so any final thoughts, any final suggestions, anything we forgot? Yes.
I just wanted you to stress the fact that it's not only about the development. I think that's what we've been concentrating on, but we have a lot of our merchants here also that want to learn a little bit more about the use of the expanded sidewalk. I think that has been, that's the majority of the overlay. So can you expand on that?
Yeah, it's about quality of life. And I think that if a city is known throughout America for incredible quality of life, Coral Gables is that city. And the George Merrick biography, I highly recommend it to all of you. I think it's a fantastic book. It really tells many stories, good, bad, inspirational, frustrations, all kinds of things. And I think that is one of the issues that at the end of the day, what's amazing about Merrick was that he had a vision of quality. And that vision was very much of placemaking, creating high-quality pedestrian areas. Now, one of the things that the overlay does is that it provides better outdoor seating. Why? Well, we have a great sidewalk that is going to be built, actually two great sidewalks. And they are designed for use by pedestrians, for use by diners, for use for all those people, all the things that we all like to do. So that's one thing. In addition, their expanded hours of operation. One of the key components of a high-quality restaurant area. Those are very significant things, and those have nothing to do with parking or how big a building should be. Those are nice features that I think are going to enhance quality of life. Now, if in addition to that we have more people living downtown, I think the city is going to get much better. Coral Gables only gets better with people. The quality of our community is outstanding. That's what people expect. So all of this is going to help. Now, the details, how do we do it? How do we get there? Is exactly what we're talking about. And that is why we change and we make it better. We make the suggestions better as we go along. I think we got some input tonight. I think we're going to have more meetings coming up. I don't know when the commission is going to make a decision yet, and when I say I don't know, it's because it has not been scheduled. So it will be done whenever the time is right, like everything in this city. We take the time that it takes to do it right. Yes, ma'am.
Regarding the outdoor seating, are there discussions underway or anything published with regard to, number one, what the city is going to charge per seat outdoors? Number two, are there regulations that will be proposed and when regarding the number of seats that can be applied for by a particular establishment based on square footage or whatever? And number three, since at least in the situation of Giralda, it's my understanding that the street will be closed to vehicular traffic on the weekends. So all those tables and chairs are in the streets on the weekends. Where are they going to go during the week? Is the city going to provide storage?
I don't think, Javier, we're not providing storage, right? Maybe Javier can answer some of those questions because, like the charges for outdoor seating. And, I mean, we're still brainstorming. I mean, the answer is we don't know. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not thinking about it. We are thinking about it. We just don't know. So at this point, if you have any suggestions, that's probably the best, the most useful information. And then we will probably set up some meetings, so public meetings like this one, to deal specifically with the implementation and the details. But like I said, if you have ideas, feel free. Let us know. Yes.
So I just wanted to ask again about the outdoor seating. The current code allows you to use the sidewalk in front of your space, and but you have to allow, I think it's 5 feet for traffic to go past. Do you envision that changing since the sidewalks are bigger? So
the answer is changing for the better. I mean, it's not getting any worse. I mean, right now there's some limits in the area. Only 30% of the area of your restaurant can be outdoor seating. So there's some limitations. So our suggestion is that those limitations go away in Miracle Mile and Giralda, and instead become predetermined areas for seating, pre-approved. Now there may be some charge and some fee. We don't know yet. That may have to be worked out. But I think that the opportunity to make it simpler and more effective and more expansive is there, and that is one of the great benefits of the overlay. It makes outdoor seating much more effective. Yes.
Can you just tell everyone about the relief on the permitting fees and everything now, so that property owners want to be able to improve their property now, they would be able to. Does everybody hear me? The city is waiving the permit fees on any kind of construction that you're doing, and also will help expedite any improvements. Is that correct?
Yeah. Let me just clarify that it's for facade improvements on the affected streets. So if you have property or a business on Miracle Mile or on Giralda, and you wanted to take this opportunity to freshen up your facade, we're going to waive permit fees during the time of construction to help you, because we know it's a painful time. But it's only for facade improvements, so no interior improvements. You could still do those, but you have to pay the permit fees.
But it's a really good benefit, and it really may be just the perfect time if you've been thinking about making some improvements on the exterior of the building. So as I said before, any final thoughts? Anything that we forget? I don't want to keep you here all night, but I think these are very exciting times. Things are changing for the better. We have a 300-year plan for the sidewalk. That is amazing that anybody will speak like that. George Merrick would have been proud. I think that the buildings he built were also designed in terms of those 200 and 300 years. That's the way cities should be designed. And I personally am very lucky to be able to help you with all this and to try to come up with some ideas to get there, because that's the point. The point is, how do we get there? Well, I think we all share the same vision. We all share the idea that the quality of life of our city is outstanding, and it can be even better, and it could last for a very long time. So I want to thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming, and contact me or any of our staff if you have any further questions. Thank you.